And the story that I was told when I was young was that this is a safe space. All the, in Dutch we say, the sheep are on the dry, everything is regulated, everything is rich. And that was the story.
Welcome to the Balie in Amsterdam. Dear guests, dear authors, dear moderators. On behalf of the UNIC Netherlands and all the people who were involved in the preparation of this event, I would like to welcome you tonight. It's really a treat to have you all here personally after 2 years when we had a hybrid event. UNIC Netherlands is a platform for cultural cooperation, and it consists of European Union National Institute of Cultures, which are developing cultural initiatives and projects like this. The topic or the theme of tonight is a very important one, and also not an easy one. Well, I'm looking forward to various discussions and opinions from various European perspectives, conducted by our moderators, Margot Dijkgraaf and Guido Snell. I will give the floor to them, and I wish you a lovely evening.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for this really kind introduction. And of course, thank you all for being here, because it's so lovely weather outside. So you really made an effort to come. Thanks for that. And of course, a big thank you to all our authors here present, who came from everywhere in Europe. My name is Margot Dijkgraaf. This is my co-moderator, Guido Snell. Tonight we have a program with 7 guests. They are from all over Europe. They're writers, of course. And as Hannah said, we have a very interesting and urgent theme, to be in a time of war, or maybe to write in a time of war. We could translate it as that also. Because these days, of course, we are writers, or they are writers in times of war. And many, of course, of us would never have believed that the war would come back in this urgency, in this format, in this violence also. To some, this has been a scenario, of course, which was waiting around the corner. They have been less naive, maybe. They have been expecting this for a long time. And to others, war has been an almost permanent fact in their lives. One of them was the Lebanese-American poet and essayist and visual artist Etel Adnan. And actually we borrowed the theme of to be in a time of war from her. And just to tell you that there is a marvelous exhibition of her work now in the Stedelijk Museum.
In the Van Gogh.
In the Van Gogh Museum.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Margot. And Etel Adnan's poet is called To Be in a Time of War. It reflects on what it means to live your daily life in times of war, when war is in the background, when war is more prominent. What we have asked our authors tonight to reflect about, and also what we will together address, are what we think really important questions. What is the effect of the current war on Europe's future, evidently, but perhaps also on the past of Europe? Maybe we have to revisit what we thought, who we were, and who we are, and what we are doing together as Europeans. Also, the perennial question to writers: how can writers speak up? Can literature be a form of resistance? Perhaps more importantly, how can the literary imagination create insight into whatever has led us into this situation. Have we been, as Margot suggested, naive or blind? Have we taken our security and our freedom for granted? And as I said, is our past still the same? And we have a beautiful lineup of writers also representing various geographies of Europe, various areas. So whenever we talk about their European past, it's a different past in each individual case. And we're also very much interested to listen to that tonight. And of course, what are the lessons for the future? That's another important question.
Let's start right away. We will present to you 3 duos and 1 single person, after all, because we had, foreseen 8 persons, but no, we have 7, so it makes 1 person at the end. And we have 3 duos to start with. May I invite Dana Agrigorcha and Thomas Herma van Veen to come forward and to sit here next to us, in the middle. Dana Agrigorcha was born in Bucharest. She studied German and Dutch literature. So, we kunnen ook wel Nederlands spreken, hè, Dana?
Ja, graag, graag.
Oké, gaan we doen.
Goedenavond.
Maybe afterwards then. She studied theater and film directing as well as journalism in Austria. And she worked as a journalist and has been living in Zurich as a freelance writer since 8 years now, I think. And her novel Das primäre Gefühl der Schuldlosigkeit has been translated in English and Dutch. And her most recent novel is called Die nicht sterben, Those Who Never Die. And she got the Swiss Literature Prize 2022 for this book. Wonderful that you are with us here tonight.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thomas Herma van Voss, most of you probably know. He studied English in London, Dutch in Amsterdam, was born in Amsterdam. He lives in Amsterdam at the moment, and he published his first novel, De Allestafel, The Everything Table, in 2009. And since then he published, several other novels who were quite successful. And recently he published a short story book called Passagiers Achterblijvers. Quite an intriguing title, Passengers and Those Who Stay Behind. We will maybe speak about that later on. And besides that, he is writing articles and essays for various newspapers and magazines. Thank you for being here with us.
Well, thank you.
And Dana, we'd like to start with you and with your novel. And also, perhaps important to know for the people here, we have asked you, each of you, to prepare 1 film fragment. And as people will find out, your film fragment will follow automatically and naturally on the topic of your novel, Die nicht sterben, Those Who Do Not Die. Maybe I can give away the secret. It's a vampire novel. And it's the intriguing and also hilarious story of a young painter who returns after her studies to Romania, her studies in Paris, goes to the village where she has spent many of her summer holidays as a child. And then somehow the story gets entangled with the ancient history of Vlad the Impaler. Okay. Perhaps before I'll ask my question, we can ask the technique to show the film clip. And people will recognize it, I suppose, immediately. to maybe the biggest cliche on Romania, Transylvania are vampires. What was on your mind creating a vampire novel?
You know, I got in touch with vampires very late in my life, and it was through this film, because I was a simultaneous translator at the Cinemateca Română, at the Romanian art house cinema, and so I was translating in the back of the audience. I had my little glass room, and I was full of adrenaline because I had to take care not to skip anything, because the people there in the audience were very cultivated and knew the films by heart and would protest when I translate wrong. So I was very happy when still films came, because I only had to read, these little texts. So I was very happy when I saw Nosferatu by Murnau comes, but I didn't know Nosferatu, and it sounds to many like a Romanian name, but I didn't link it. I linked it to Nosfer, to maybe the stalker, no sphere, no. So then I saw this film, and I was so challenged because it has lots of text, and very poetical text, and also handwritings, which was very hard to read, and so I was full of adrenaline when translating this film. And after a couple of times of translating him, I realized how good he's made. It's Murnau worked with a metronome, so it's a ballet really well tacted. And this is art, this is the art I want to make, really everything well put into place, really the good time to say things. And I thought, now after it's my 5th book, it's time to write the ultimate Dracula novel, because everybody is expecting this of me. But I wanted to write it because the theme is a theme that troubles me. That it's about so many people cherishing dark figures, helping dark figures into power, helping even by not noticing the dark powers. Here in Nosferatu, Hatter, the young, naive man thinks that he can only do business with the Dracula and with Nosferatu, and that with people with whom one does businesses, there can come no harm from. And he's wrong, and this was my theme for Die nicht sterben, those who don't die, figures we thought long ago dead and buried, coming out of their graves and hunting us. Yep.
Thomas, did you see Nosferatu, and how old were you?
I haven't seen it.
You
no.
didn't see it? Oh dear.
No.
Then you will have a big adventure.
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube. Well, I will look it up. Yeah, definitely. After your words. Yeah.
When we invited you, Thomas, to this evening, and we spoke about a film fragment, you said, "Oh, I have an immediate idea," and it was related to your first reaction, actually, to the theme. Mm-hmm. Could you say what your statement was? Because you sent us your statement, actually. Could you tell us how it reads? We have a projection.
Yeah, my statement was too long, so this is what you took out of it. And you asked me both for a statement and a film fragment, and I'm more of a film fragment guy than of a statement guy, because when I write, of course, news reaches me. I think about it a lot, but my writing is also, it feels separate from what happens in the outside world. And what I try in my writing is, this is a collection of short stories, my latest book, and they are all 6 like slices of life, 6 different main characters, of course. But what I try to do is get inside their head, and the protagonists are never the winners of society, also never the losers. But I try to give like a voice to people that are frowned upon normally. And what inspired me also, for example, for this book, and what I see often in news and media, is that when you had the COVID restrictions in the Netherlands, just as in many other countries, there were a lot of demonstrations and protesters. And there were big crowds, tens of thousands of people. And one day it was asked to our Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, if he was interested in what these protesters were thinking and feeling and their whole background. And his brief answer was just, no, I'm not interested in it, period. And that's such a lack of interest and such a lack of empathy. And I try to, well, not gain that gap with my writing, but I try to be interested in those kind of people and to be interested in people that are outside my writing room, of course, but I don't write about war. I don't write about big political movements and stuff. And I've also sent you a film fragment, and maybe this is a good moment to show it, because that's the conversation I always hear when I start writing.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yes.
Sir, what if a writer is attempting to create a story where nothing much happens, where people don't change, they don't have any epiphanies, they struggle and are frustrated and nothing is resolved? More a reflection of the real world.
The real world?
Yes, sir.
The real fucking world. First of all, you write a screenplay without conflict or crisis, you'll bore your audience to tears. Secondly, nothing happens in the world? Are you out of your fucking mind? People are murdered every day. There's genocide, war, corruption. Every fucking day, somewhere in the world, somebody sacrifices his life to save somebody else. Every fucking day, someone somewhere takes a conscious decision to destroy someone else. People find love, people lose it. For Christ's sake, a child watches a mother beaten to death on the steps of a church. Someone goes hungry. Somebody else betrays his best friend for a woman. If you can't find that stuff in life, then you, my friend, don't know crap about life. And why the fuck are you wasting my 2 precious hours with your movie? I don't have any use for it. I don't have any bloody use for it.
Okay, thanks.
So this is what you hear, Thomas, when you...
Yeah, when my computer is warming up.
Great. Does it inspire you?
Yeah, well, I think this is from the movie Adaptation, where there's I will keep it short. There are twin brothers, both played by Nicolas Cage. They're starting to write a screenplay together, and one of the two wants to write a screenplay where nothing happens. This is obviously that brother. The other wants a lot of action. And there's always a conflict when I write between both really stripped down psychological protagonists that don't see a lot of the world, and the world that's rumbling outside the door. And that's what resonates in the scene.
Perfect image for you.
Yeah.
I would like to pick up on that, because in your statement you're quite outspoken on the sort of the universal position that writers can and should take, perhaps, and perhaps Nicolas Cage's initial question, can I just write about daily life where nothing happens, may reflect that. Dana wrote a novel starting from a story that has been all around her. I mean, coming from Romania, and the cliche question then, of course, is how about that story, right? How about your corner of Europe? What's the sort of, because your stories touch upon everyday life, people, your protagonists, they sort of, the beautiful story of the guy who picks the girl's book and tries to imagine her life. Mm-hmm. And in your corner of Europe, what are the big stories in the background?
Well, the big stories are changing, of course, the last couple of months, because I grew up in this city. I was born in 1990, and the story that I was told when I was young was that this is a safe space. All the, in Dutch we say, the sheep are on the dry. Everything is regulated. Everything is rich, and that was the story. And of course, the last couple of years, there are a lot of big stories questioning, or big questions about capitalism, about the whole political, economical, environmental system we built with each other. And there's more, there's more criticism towards that, but it feels for me as unsuccessful criticism, because it touches the fundamentals of the whole system, and these are really important questions. So there are a lot of stories surrounding that, but I don't think many people are able to change it now. And everybody that I know, I'm 31, everybody around me wants to buy a house in the city. Nobody is able to. Everybody wants to stay green, but of course they fly. There's a lot of hypocrisy, which I don't even condemn, but that's the system we're captured in. And if I write, I don't write about a soldier's frontier, but I write also about that kind of hypocrisy, and where the inner world and the inner desires to change something, maybe even small, conflict with this outside world. But even in this safe space, I do it like this because, of course, it isn't. There are a lot of big stories rumbling in the background, and I feel that more louder every year.
Yeah, yeah.
Dana, in your part of the world and with your background, of course, the stories are quite different. You made us look at Nosferatu, but what are the big stories in your life, and especially nowadays? Did your life change since the war started, for instance? And your writing, let's speak about writing.
Yes, actually I don't consider I am writing in a certain way because I have a certain background, or because I have a certain society around me. So of course I reflect on everything I see and on everything that happens to me, but I can also write. I also wrote a love story that's taking place in Zurich. So it's not. I don't only take historical or subjects, but actually I write because I'm not spontaneous, and I feel angry. Not angry, I feel frustrated of not having said things in the right moment. And then the discussions I had, or what I should have said, follows me and often grows to a story. So actually I write slow, and I enjoy this slowliness. And now, as a citizen and reacting to what happens to us, I am politically also active. Not in a party anymore, but I'm active as a citizen, and I organized for 5 years in Zurich monthly charity readings, and we send the money to Lesbos, and of course but this is not. I wouldn't mingle this with arts, because in arts, what could be the way to react as an artist is maybe to use in times the scene to give to show color, to say no, this is crime, what's happening now, this is a war of Russia on Ukraine, this is not just, and I'm saying this, and we have to take action, and how do we do this? But to start looking for the traces of the big events in society, in our literature, is maybe also a little bit of using this times to promoting our books. Of course, the books reflect society. So this book I wrote about the undead themes is about this. This is also an undead theme. We also thought that there will be no war. There is no guy like Putin. There's no. This is history, and now we are trapped in a loop, in a time loop.
Yeah, I think you have that in common, because you both write you say both, well, I'm not writing on the war, I'm not writing on the life, I'm not writing on society. But in the meantime, every writing is, of course, about the world you live in.
Yeah.
So that's true. Maybe a good starting point for our next duo. So I'm very sorry, but time is flying as well.
Yeah. So we have to thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we would like to invite Natasha Kramberger, I'm looking into the light, and Laura Freixas to join us. There are clean glasses for water. So, very warm welcome to you as well. Great that you are here. Let me briefly introduce the two of you. You, Laura, you were born in Madrid. You are a very prolific writer, novelist, essayist, literary critic, translator, journalist, and perhaps it is safe to say that you are most well known also as a feminist writer. Books on women and daughters is the persistent theme in your literary work. Natasha, you were born in Slovenia, and you are a novelist. You work as a freelance writer, also a journalist for newspapers. Your novel, Blackberry Heaven, translated in English, was a recipient of the European Literature Prize 10 years ago, approximately. But you also founded in 2009 an eco-collective, a farm. So you are combining a life as a writer and life as a farmer. So this conversation is also going to be about two different political ways to relate to our current reality.
Laura, of course, like Guido said, you are mostly known as a very feminist writer. Women are the subject for you. We asked for your information these two writers to select an image about which they would like to speak, which corresponded to their ideas. And Laura, before you are going to speak about this picture, which you have been proposing to us, could you tell us, if possible, from what source, from what inner drive this feminism of yours is coming? I mean, of course, there are millions reasons of today to become a feminist, but in your particular case, as a woman writer in Spain, tell me, I'm very curious to know.
Well, for me, the inequality is blatant, is obvious, is everywhere. I have been always conscious of it because my mother was and is very conscious of it, so I always saw her frustrated and angry about her lot, about her being a housewife. And I always noticed all kinds of inequality. I thought that I could overcome it, that it would not affect me because I was very smart and and I was a feminist and I was conscious of it. So I knew I would not fall into the traps, but I did. I fell into maybe other traps that I had not foreseen. And it proved a fascinating subject. I think that I am very lucky to be a woman writer, because when you have the impression that everything has already been explored and written about, then you discover that there are many crucial, burning, important subjects that are not or are very little reflected in literature.
For instance?
Motherhood. Or all the relationships between women, mothers and daughters, women friends, women colleagues, rivalry between women, or also the female viewpoint on shared experiences such as the couple. Mm-hmm. And this is unending for me. It's fascinating, and for me it's a very good subject as a writer and also as a reader and a researcher. So I read a lot of literature by women, and I try to analyze and study it. For instance, I do this with Sylvia Plath or Anaïs Nin, that inspire me a lot.
Mm-hmm. Now you brought us a picture. And you brought us a statement as well.
Yeah. Yes, because I was very surprised, not exactly by the fact that as soon as the war broke, the Ukrainian government decreed that women could leave the country, but men couldn't. But I was surprised and dismayed at the lack of discussion of this, the fact that it was taken for granted. Everybody seemed to accept it as natural. And there was very little discussion, at least in the Spanish press, and I also follow the French and the British press, and I did find very, very little. And so for me this proved again something that worries me a lot, which is that equality between the sexes is supposed to be an identifying feature of Europe. It is one of our core values, but in fact it's make-believe. I mean, it's accepted in principle, but do we really fight to put it into practice? And what do we do when this practice would challenge what is considered common sense? For example, the fact that women do not go to war. In fact, I myself was naive and had never really thought about war. It was a subject that was completely alien to me, fortunately. And now I have had to think about it. My conclusion is that if we do believe in equality, why should we divide the population into two different groups with completely different obligations and freedoms, which, by the way, contradicts even the Ukrainian constitution? I have discovered that it has an article, 24, which says that no privilege or restriction will be made on the basis of sex. So they contradict their own constitution, and everybody finds it normal, apparently.
Natasha, before we go to your take on your own activism, Laura, you speak in your statement about the assumptions behind this decision. What are the assumptions behind this? What is the fundamental assumption about the role of women behind this phenomenon?
That men wage war, are aggressive and must defend the country, and women's destiny is care, especially unpaid care. And that's what they should do. And the consequence is that they are excluded from decision-making. The negotiations are taking place without any women, and the sexual stereotypes that are so bad for us are reinforced, and nobody challenges them.
Yeah, yeah. Natasha, next to writing, at some point in your life you decided, this is not enough. I need to do more. And you decided to start a farm, an eco-collective. Why did you do so, and what is the goal of this?
The farm was actually the coincidence that happened to me because my mother started buying a land and she went bankrupt, so somebody needed to save the situation. But I have always been attracted by social ecology. As I discovered social ecology like in 2007 or 2008, I somehow realized that's something I want to explore more. And the basic statement of social ecology is that the social justice is just another side of ecological justice, and the opposite, ecological justice is just the other side of social justice. And everything has a lot to do with the power, the system of power that we create. So power over somebody or over something, and the hierarchy that we are somehow just used to. And I wanted to try it in practice, actually. I thought at a certain point, I read so much about it, I wrote so much about it, now I will try it, because whenever I wrote about it, I expressed myself for direct action. And direct action means you at a certain point start make action. I wanted to make a farm that would work as a collective, that would not be a family, patriarchal, hierarchical way of living, but a more horizontal way of decision making, and biodiversity also on a social level, so that everybody can find something to do, can find a place, can have a value in a system, whatever this value would be and whatever the system would be. So I just started it. I grew up on a farm. I thought, I know how you should farm. I realized, of course, I had no idea about it once I started to do it in practice. But not farming itself was so difficult as this social part of the farming was. And still the biggest problem we face is the social problem, the fact that we are not a family on a farm, that there is no man leading the farm, and that we try to do things equally, in a sense that everybody can try to do something, and that everybody has an important part, no matter that is a woman or a man or an animal or a plant or any other creature that we may not even know.
Just a moment, but you say the fact that there was no man on the farm is a problem?
Yes, of course. Because the man is a strong person driving a tractor and who always knows what to do. And the female figure is, a weak figure that cannot really fight the nature, because the farming, agriculture itself in our minds is always a question of fight against the nature, because it's a question of control.
Yeah. Now I'm looking now at your neighbor. Because it's very interesting what she's got. Yeah. It's very connected, because in fact, it's a question of equality and it's a question of social justice.
Yes, it's this mentality that man must have control of nature, and woman is included into nature, and a vision of the world made of power and control. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Could we perhaps have the image that Natasha brought?
Yeah.
So, okay, this is rustic, rural,
yes.
but tell us more about it.
Yeah, it's actually very egocentric, because it's the picture of myself that was made when I started farming. And it's an idea of a friend of mine who just wanted to show the position where I start. And it's a position where I have a pumpkin instead of a head, because I really had no idea about what I had to do. But somehow this willingness to take care of plants, of what we do, of what we want to create, and also a big burden that actually all of this stuff is, especially in the time that we are living, in the time of climate change, when everything linked to nature is not an easy job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Laura, you practice your activism through writing. Mm-hmm. You have a widely read column. Mm-hmm. How do you look upon this kind of intervention from your seasoned experience as a feminist thinker?
You mean the column?
No, I mean your tools are writing. You write columns, and this is how your voice is heard and how you influence public debate in Spain. Mm-hmm. And you're listening to Natasha, and Natasha took another step into reality.
It's very alien to me. I am a city dweller, really. I know very little about, I hope you know more than me, about the countryside and agriculture. But I think it's necessary to, especially nowadays with climate change, which is outrageously denied and ignored, at least in Spain.
Yeah, but if I may link to this, I thought, when I started it, I thought I need to do it because I cannot achieve anything by writing. Mm-hmm. But more I do farming, more I'm convinced that we can do a lot with writing. So, yeah.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, because Dana also said in the first panel, well, she's interested by the link between art and society, art and politics. Now you are both active in this way, but in a different way. How far goes this engagement? What can you achieve? What do you want to achieve, Laura?
Well, I think I write about political issues. For example, when all the process of would-be independence of Catalonia, I was against it, and I wrote very strongly explaining why. And I felt rather optimistic because after a period that was very, very difficult, very dangerous, and very confrontational, I think things calmed down. And I felt that all people who had written and tried to convince and explain our position had, to a certain extent, won. Mm-hmm. So I keep on trying to do this, and I also feel that it is my duty as a citizen. I have a very strong superego, and I feel that I must do something, as if there was somewhere someone looking at me and saying, but aren't you doing anything about this? Do you realize this, and aren't you acting? They say, yes, of course I must do something. Mm-hmm. And what I can do best is writing, and I see that I sometimes convince people, and I have a certain effect, so it is very rewarding. But I think that culture is very, very effective, not only direct political writing, but also films and novels do have an enormous effect. And therefore, I think that we who write or make films or whatever have a responsibility towards society. So I don't defend so much freedom, unrestricted freedom. I think we have a responsibility, which is a great honor, which is something wonderful, and we must, how do you say, estar a la altura? You speak Spanish, don't you?
Oh, say it again.
Estar a la altura. We must...
Thank you.
Thank you. Be to the level?
Yeah, rise up to the occasion, is that it?
Yes.
Yeah? I don't know Spanish. But
I didn't tell you I spoke Spanish, I think, but okay.
No, I think Pilar told me that you did.
Thank you very much. How do you, maybe a last question to Natasha? We have time for that.
Yeah, we do have, yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel about, well, you have this super ego, the responsibility which pushes you to reach a certain level. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is that the same? Do you have the same attitude, or is it different for you? Do you have a super ego which is as forceful as Laura's?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a certain urge to just move your ass and do something. Especially because as a farmer, I really see things going on, like as mentioned, climate change or everything what considers our possibility or not possibility of the future. I somehow feel responsible to the environment, and I also think I got a certain talent. I grew up in the family of storytellers, so storytelling is something I like to do and I can do. So I try to use it in a way, and just to stay together with others through the stories is a big privilege, I think. And just to enjoy this privilege per se, it's, I think, a bit irresponsible at the moment. I also feel that you have to tell the stories that need to be told at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We love your super egos.
Cherish them. Yeah.
Cherish them, grow them, and make it feminist and even more feminist. Thank you so much for being
here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then may we invite our next duo, Jitka Brett Serboa and Rein Raut, please. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, exactly. Jitka is a Czech poet and a journalist. She has published several poetry collections. The most recent one is The Forest and the World, if I'm not mistaken. Yes?
That is true.
And she is also the chairperson of the Czech Writers Association. And she lives in a small town in central Bohemia, of which I cannot pronounce the name, but...
Yeah, it's called Hořovice.
Thank you very much. And Rein is an Estonian scholar and author. He was professor in the Department of World Cultures at the University of Helsinki, among other universities. And he has published collections of poetry, novels, several collections of short stories and plays. And he's also well known for his translation, and that may surprise you, his translations of Japanese classical literature, and his novel, The Death of the Perfect Sentence, was recently published in English.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. And we would like to start by inviting you, Jitka, to recite one of your poems.
Yeah, I do have to get that.
So
I have it here if you want to read it.
You do have it. Yeah, you have it printed.
But we have the English translation here.
Of course.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course. Yeah.
And it's also on one of the slides. So, and it's from your most recent collection, The World.
Make me a poem where our words weaken. Take the dream's remains and add hot water. At the brim of the teacup, the seventh petal opens to the boy's forts. I want in. Make me a stanza from the stream's secret mission, from the silence beyond the village. I want to see the hip flask left on the deer stand and happiness over poached zander. Make me a verse from the ancient alchemy of childhood. In return, I will make you a stone with a key to forgotten paths, and I will give it to you.
Thank you.
If there is a native speaker, I'm sorry, because all I can do is mimic the proper pronunciation, of course.
Jitka, you write where our words weaken, and then you write, make me a stanza from the silence beyond the village. So words are losing power, but silence can also speak. We had an interview with you, with students, a couple of weeks ago, and we spoke a lot about your response to the war. On the one hand, silence, because we are overwhelmed, we are overpowered, and on the other hand, still perhaps the force of literature. Perhaps I can invite you to reflect on your statement, if we can have it on the screen.
Yeah, well, it is still difficult for me. For me, it is a personal thing, and I believe that for anyone who's, I was born in the 70s in the Czech Republic, which was at the time still, let's say, overpowered by the Soviet Union. So, living in a country where the freedom is denied and you live under double standards of what is the official truth and what is the truth that is told within the family. That is something that is, it's been there with me in my childhood. Then, fortunately, it has gone, and we hoped it would be gone for good. And all of a sudden, I feel it coming again, and I feel it, that is something that is beyond my hands or individual power to push back. But still, all of us together, and each and every writer and every person who has a voice, which is basically every person in a free country, we can together and one by one add the voice to the crowd and say, well, there are things that can never be allowed anymore, and there are things that we should really fight for, and one of them is really freedom of the world and freedom of word. So that is obviously what writers should do, and each of them by their choice of subject.
Yeah.
Rein, you were interviewed as well by the students of Guido, and one of the sentences you said there was so true. I would like to come back to that. You said the duty of a writer is to fight against simplicity. I think that is crucial.
Yes, well, especially when you start to look back at events that have kind of like, there are already stories about it, and we all know how they were and so on. And then some kind of simple narratives of good and evil get imposed on the reality, which is always complex, always more complicated than can be addressed. And then why I think it is impossible to write about this war at this moment is precisely because at this moment we have to believe in this simple tale of good versus evil, just like Itka said, because the time of complexity will come later. And for example, for me personally, when the independence struggle of Estonia took place in late 80s and early 90s, I was always also, it is not that simple, but we have to keep it simple, like for the time being. I can't write about it, because if I write about it, that means I have to give voice also to those whom I don't like, just like Thomas said, and I have to understand them. Now, when I think of the butchers of Bucha, I don't want to get into their minds. It's not possible. But if I want to write about them, I should, which means I can't write about them. And well, the first couple of weeks of the war were such that, first of all, you get up, you go and open the internet, and you check if Kiev is still standing. Then you go and wash your teeth. Yeah, and after this sort of complete, overwhelming immersion into the war started to recede, then I was asking myself, am I ever going to be able to write? Because whatever I have to say is meaningless in the face of this at this moment. Yep. But yes, the task of the writer is to fight simplicity. The task of the writer is to fight things that are kind of obvious and clear, and to bring the complex and to bring the sort of chaotic depth of reality back onto the surface.
against simplicity, can we invite you to read the small excerpt from your novel?
Yes, it is. It's the novel called The Death of the Perfect Sentence. It speaks about the times when precisely this fight for Estonian independence was going on. And we meet two characters in here. One of them is Raim, a young boy who is a participant of this independence struggle. And the other is Lydia Petrovna, who used to be his teacher of Russian at school. But later, because of better pay or other circumstances, Lydia Petrovna went to work as a typist in the KGB. Now, Raim had been tasked, because Raim actually had a crush on her. She's a very beautiful woman. Had a crush on her during the school time. And then now he's given the task to seduce and recruit her. So they have just made love. And during pillow talk, Raim has explained to her what this is all about. "What a total bastard you are," said Lydia Petrovna, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. She was sitting up in bed and smoking with her satin pyjama jacket open. Raim had just placed the Minox EC camera on the bedside cupboard and explained to Lydia Petrovna how to use it and what kinds of pictures she should take with it. For Raim, the moment which followed seemed to last much longer than it actually did, because he had little experience of such situations. But Lydia Petrovna now had two options. Her employers would assume that she would inform them about the conversation which had just taken place, and as a consequence, Raim would then be arrested, most probably followed by several of his friends and acquaintances, especially the acquaintance who had given Raim that wonderful piece of equipment invented by the Baltic German engineer. In other words, her employers would have assumed that she would betray her lover. Her lover, however, assumed that she would put her liberty and maybe even her life on the line to join a struggle that she didn't necessarily identify with in order to enable something to pass across the border between two worlds, something which might eventually determine the fate of many people, most of whom she didn't even know. In other words, that she would betray her employers. The question was, which of those scenarios would result in Lydia Petrovna betraying herself? In other words, there was no question.
Thank you. Thank you. Jitka, you too, again in the beautiful interview with students, you spoke about growing up under Soviet rule as, I quote, a bad dream. And you were referring to the empty phrases, the bad poetry, the ideology that was omnipresent in language. What does that mean for you as a poet, now that sort of the realm of untruth and the lies are so prominent again?
Yeah, well, what we can do always is, as a writer, to oppose it. So to seek as good as we can and as honestly as we can the maximum truth and the best way possible to maybe transfer what we see, what we feel to others, so maybe they can feel it too, and then it potentially could change their action or thoughts. That is, of course, that as an author, I have to believe that I do have such a position, or I must feel that there is something that I can give, and the others can maybe adopt. But in the present time, I'd say it doesn't require much else but watching, observing, and not being ignorant to what is happening around ourselves, and living in my country where the crisis, the war and its consequence is very much felt. It's on everyday basis, it's everywhere. It is not a difficult task to see, it is a difficult task to put into the right words that would work later with others.
Yeah.
So the responsibility that our previous guests talked about, you feel that both?
Yeah, absolutely. And in my case, I probably wouldn't speak that much about the superego that is forcing me. It is more the compassion with those in pain and those who are losing everything in every minute, like in the adaptation, the furious screenwriter was, shouting about, I don't need shouting. I think it's more about really like being present and just pointing your finger or pointing your words at what is happening around ourselves, because in the end, what we are doing maybe is, if we are lucky and if we succeed, we can turn others to do little actions, and all little actions, even though they will not change the way the world revolves, they may change one life, and that is enough.
Could you?
Yes, well, I think one of the responsibilities that we have now, not the only one, but one is, again, not to simplify, not to do certain things. Well, my daughter is a screenwriter, so she was speaking about stuff that their studio is going to do and so on, and that they're thinking about new projects. And I thought, well, are you going to do anything with Ukraine? She said, no, because if there would be a film about Ukraine, about the war now, it would be full of cliches, it would be a sort of Netflix type of series and so on. It is so unfair to the Ukrainian people if they would be depicted like that. And in order to do a proper film about Ukraine, you have to go much deeper than it is just like humanly possible at this very moment. I don't know if I agree quite, because you can do documentaries and all that, but to create, to really understand, you have to live it through on a much deeper level than it is just like reading news and reading facts and so on. One thing that I must say, for which I have tremendous respect for the Ukrainians, is that they haven't lost their sense of humor in spite of everything that is happening, and that you can sometimes watch in the internet clips where they where they are taking the war not lightly, but with a poignant and sharp sense of humor, which is a tremendous will to live. When you lose your sense of humor, you don't. Well, I mean, you have lost something of your will to live as well, I think. But as I said, it's just one thing or one part of our responsibility, because I think more likely we should be trying to try to get people from Ukraine to speak and to have their stories. Not our ideas of what their stories might be like.
You agree, I see that.
Oh yeah.
Why do you agree so much?
Well, because there is no one more appropriate to speak of Ukrainian people and situation than Ukrainians, and sadly, even in the Czech Republic, which is almost neighboring country, I'd say it is, or it used to be, at the times of Czechoslovakia, not much has been heard of Ukrainian writers, and we have a big debt to repay, and this is what is happening at the moment. For example, there was a Svět knihy, the book fair, a couple of days ago, and many Czech writers were reading stories and poems by Ukrainian writers who couldn't come. So it is not changing the course of war, but it is exactly why I am not nodding my head so much, giving voice to those who don't have it at the moment or do not have easy access to speaking public.
Yeah. On a slightly different note, Rein, you, with your history and how and where you grew up, you are also deeply invested in Russian culture and Russian literature.
Well, aren't we all? In that this is a part of the European heritage.
Yeah. But it's also, I also bring it up because you, Jitka, as well, again in the interview with students, pointed to the fact how important it is to also keep listening to the poets and writers in the Russian language. So to not perhaps give in to this false division between Russia on the one hand and the rest of Europe on the other. How would you respond to that?
Well, absolutely, because the question is not about your citizenship or even your first language, it's the question of your humanity. And it's a question of values, and there are many Russians who share these values, and I see no reason whatsoever to sort of like switch them off from this conversation. After all, this war will not be won if there is not going to be some kind of internal transformation of the Russian society, or at least voices inside the Russian society who would be asking for such a transformation or saying that they need such a transformation and so on. And again, it's not that. I think that's a little bit the problem of Russia, that they have always thought that all these ideas, they always come from the West. The French Revolution, and then, you know, Napoleon, all these Decembrists, all that stuff, even Marx, you know, everything comes from the West, and then it's sort of implemented in Russia. They said, no, now we want something that's properly ours, which happens to be Hegel, but in a fascist reading, but nonetheless, it's something that they now want some nationalist ideology and so on. I mean, whatever the level of cruelty and absurdity that this ideology is giving them, it probably has this sort of emotional comfort that, well, now we're doing our proper thing, yeah? And when they wake up to see how hideous their proper thing is, denial is probably going to result, which is why we very much need a dialogue with sensible Russians, with those with whom we can still speak.
Yeah. You are right now chairperson of the Czech Writers Association. How can one do that? How can one have that conversation with the writers and poets of Russia?
Well, it is like very difficult at the moment, since obviously, you know, there is like many channels of communication have been banned. So the sources that I'm speaking of, or I was speaking of, were coming through social media before they got shut, and it was like Czech writers contacting their friends in Russia, asking them like for. So how do you, what's really happening there? Because obviously we could understand that not entire nation is applauding to what is happening, and some people, as I said in those interviews, were opposing it strongly at a great personal risk. So those voices were heard, and you know, people were sending their contribution, their poems through those channels while they could. At the moment, it's more and more difficult and almost impossible, of course. But that doesn't mean these voices do not exist anymore. It is an extremely sensitive topic, and in my country especially, because it is like very polarizing. Okay, so there are several people or some people who are struggling, fighting the regime, but you know, the majority of, and so. In political and economical sense, you know, it's the majority that is listened to and that is pointed at. But still, as an artist, and I think that all of us as artists, we cannot accept this concept of like a national guilt, or it, you know, it's again, it's back, it's to. You know what happened after the Second World War, like the whole nation is to blame. Obviously, there is no there is no doubt about who is the evil part and who is, who is struggling for life and who is defending. But I think it's important that we acknowledge that there is no unified mass of Russians.
And even if there is no dialogue at the moment, because those voices in Russia are all kind of wholly silenced, then there will be a dialogue in the future if we want to win this war collectively. And if we position ourselves now that you're Russian, we don't talk to you, then those voices will maybe stay silent instead of speaking up.
Thank you so much for having shared your thoughts and opinions with us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to invite for our last panel, Katja Petrovskaya. So, have a seat.
To sit between two chairs.
Yeah. You chose the right chair. Let me introduce you. For those who do not know you yet, you grew up in Kiev. You do define yourself as a European writer living in Berlin. One of the definitions.
I'm not a writer.
You're not a writer. A European human being living in Berlin. You and Margot has the book with her. You published in 2014 the acclaimed novel Vielleicht Esther, perhaps Esther, in which you reconstruct family history.
Which translated into Dutch.
Into Dutch, and Margot has the Dutch translation. But you wrote that book in German, whereas your first language is Russian. So you are bilingual, and you also have a background, of course, in Slavic studies. You studied in the city where Rein Raut was also a professor for many years. So your biography is in several places at the same time. Very welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about your work. We're also going to talk about your latest book, which we have here, which is also about to appear in English translation, and the title is Das Foto schaute mich an. The picture is looking at me. The photograph is looking at me. Margot.
Wonderful to have you. We spoke a lot about resistance and responsibility and super egos. Well, for having read Camus during the pandemic, I have been asking myself, what does Camus, the philosopher, the French philosopher, say about how can we resist? He wrote an essay, for instance, L'homme révolté, the revolted man, the man in revolt, in answering to the world. Actually, after many thoughts and books and essays, his answer was quite impressive and maybe easy. He said, well, the only thing we can do to resist is just continue to work. Isn't that the only answer we can give to several situations in our life? Just continue to do the things we are good at?
No. I think that he didn't give a definition of work. And I mean, when this war started, it was a question for all people who really understand what's going on and how dangerous it is for the whole Europe or for the whole world, actually what we can do and how we can stop this war. Because this war showed that all our systems of political security didn't work, that all our energy system didn't work, that we are dependent. We are not only depend on Putin regime. We created this Putin regime, and Netherlands, Germany, and all these beautiful countries, and our richness, and our not only our warm houses, but actually the complete chemical industry is connected to this crime of Putin. And it was time already after the second Chechenian war to react. And all this time, I mean, it's also, we were talking together about the responsibility and about past. What is actually past? Especially living in Germany, you know, it's just the main subject of German concern, what actually had happened then in Europe, what happened with this nation, how to understand the step from Weimar Republic, which is one of the most incredible political creatures, to the Dritte Reich. And I mean, this culture of memory is now. And I really don't understand German pacifism because it's absolutely clear that not Ukraine is escalating, but Putin is escalating already from the second Chechenian war through Georgian war, through annexation of Crimea and war in Ukraine and then in Syria. We were watching all of that, and I mean, Ukraine is the only country in the world. Talking about feminism, Laura, I have to answer you because I think your statement is a scandal, and I mean, Ukraine is the only country in the world which refused. I'm not going to talk about my book; it's not that important. Which refused to freely, voluntarily of its nuclear power, and we see the consequences now. You know, and so talking about militarism in Ukraine is strange, and so I want to come back to the statement of Laura. I really think that many of people in Europe still stick to their super egos and well-shaped ideological categories, and not really realizing what's going on, and not maybe knowing some things, because I think that it's really a scandal for European feminism, which I do respect. I do not represent it, but I do respect highly. Not to talk about rapist killing nature of Putin regime and not to cry about that each second, but to mention that there is something there in Ukraine that men shouldn't leave a country and women can. I mean, there are 40,000 women in the regular army. I have a friend who is a singer. She's 53, she's on the front. I have friends and kids from my friends who are in the regular army, women, and they were philosophers, and now they started like 8 years ago to learn like tactic medicine, not because they are militant, but just they were smelling this war.
Yeah. Laura, would you like to reply? Because then I invite you to come over here. I can understand that if you're statement is approached like this, then you would like to answer.
Well, I'm not sure I have understood what exactly your reason for saying what telling it's a scandal what I said. Of course, I'm perfectly aware of rape. And I think it is one of the reasons why women should be allowed to take arms would be to defend themselves. I mean, as soon as you divide population in two and you say this part must take arms and the other one can only flee or stay.
Women are not allowed to take arms, they are freely taking arms. And it's strange that you're talking in this way, making out of Ukrainian women again a sort of object. That's really striking. And the second thing is really strange, why you choose this as a statement for your speech, if it's obvious deficit of Ukrainian power now, but there really are the crying topics, and it's very, very important also for feminism not to lose this focus. What are you going to fight? And I mean, the main enemy now in Europe is Putin, and one has to find the means of fighting him and this kind of logic. we are supporting, also with our economy and with our politics, and also with saying, like Alice Schwarzer, that Germany shouldn't sell weapons to Ukraine. You know, just give up, because otherwise you are supporting the war.
Laura.
So I was really. I think it's enough.
Can I just ask Laura, what, in your perspective, in the current situation, what would be to you the justifiable position, feminist position, when a war breaks out? War have always been fought by men, mostly amongst men.
There are 40,000 women in the range.
I know, but I mean, talking about the sort of what we were talking about earlier, the perceived notion of war. What would be the proper response according to you?
I think that if defending one's country with arms is a value, then or an obligation, it should be an obligation and a value for everyone. And if fleeing is a right, then it should be a right to everyone. So this is my basic point. I know that women have not been educated to wage war, and that men have not been educated to take care of the children and elderly. But if every time there is a crisis we fall back to the usual roles and stereotypes, we will never leave them aside. We will always follow it. And specifically in this, in the present situation, I think since both things must be done, one is defending the country with arms, and the other one that must be done is to take charge of the elderly, children, etc. What could have been done is to decree that in every family, one person should be allowed to flee the country with the elderly, the ill, and the children, and not doing the division according to sex.
Thank you very much. I think we should now move on to the photos. I know you don't want to speak about this, but it's very important.
But really, I mean, it's exactly what is done now, and there are new laws. But I'm just against this focus. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you very much, both of you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Katja, you said cultural memory is now.
Yes.
Your book, which we are going to talk about, Das Fotoschaut mich an. What you do in this book, you practice cultural memory. You show how it works, and you show it by looking at photos, writing about photos, but also perhaps talking back to the stories that these photos are telling. Can I invite you to explain Bergman von Donbass?
Maybe how many minutes do we have?
As much as you need.
No, I wrote my first book about a European person moving from Berlin to Kiev through this blood landscape, bloodlands. And it's not a book about the war, actually. It's a book about a modern person which is stumbling over the war all the time, moving through from Berlin, from this like empty space in the middle of the city, through Poland and coming to Kiev. And my book, maybe Esther, perhaps Esther, Mission Esther? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Ends with Institutskaya Street, where I was born. And I finished actually my book in 2013. And exactly at this time, Maidan took place in Kiev. When thousands and hundred thousands of people were standing on the Maidan Square protesting against the regime of Yanukovych, and in February, and my book ends with Institutskaya Street, and they were standing just next to the street. And in February, ends because I'm coming back. So I'm moving from Berlin railway station to my birthplace in Kiev. It's a sort of prodigy daughter story, maybe. And And in February, these 100 people who were killed during Maidan protests were killed exactly on my street. So first I finished the book, and then these people were killed. So actually, I really feel that I'm sort of in the hux of the war, because when I was writing this book, I was also writing columns, like sort of satirical, frivolous columns for Frankfurter Allgemeine Sonntagszeitung, and actually when Vielleicht Esther was published almost on the date of annexation of Crimea, and I was standing with my Second World War, like in a sort of, it's too early.
Can we go back to the first picture?
Yes, and it's a very strange situation, because, you know, it's again the war, and the war started actually 8 years ago, and it was this picture which was really like following me, made by Evgenia Belarusets, who's my beautiful friend, and she's intellectual from Kiev, philosopher, translator, and photographer, and she also starts, and it's maybe sort of also coincidence of time. It's her picture from 2015, and when the war in Ukraine started, I had the presentation, and when this airplane was.
The MH that was shut down.
I had a presentation in Amsterdam, and it was really very strange, because I was approached by Secret Service people who were asking me about this airplane as if I know more than them. And actually it was not funny, because I thought that if they think that I know more, how our world is protected actually.
But this photo, this photo is about knowing and not knowing, right?
Yes, thank you that you're helping me to talk about literature. And yes, this photo was really following me, because it's impossible to grasp what kind of bleak, what kind of gaze is it. He's a Bergman miner from the front zone in East Ukraine, Krasnoarmeysk. I've never been there, and Zhenya Belarusets made a whole series of pictures of these people who are going down, and they don't know what kind of power is up in the ground when they are coming back. So it was really a front zone, and this gaze is impossible to deuten.
To explain, to interpret, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that's how I actually started to write on photography. It's not only regarding the pain of others, it's ours, it's good. It's also this kind of not really understanding who is in pain. And he's questioning, is he questioning me? Is he questioning himself? Is it a reproach? Is it a misery of his state? Is he actually only in peace when he is working, and war is absurd and the only resistance is to work? Just to answer your statement. Yes, maybe he agrees with Camus, but I'm not, because it's anyway. If you not regard, I'm not regarding myself as an artist. I'm regarding myself as a person, and in every second of my life, it's the question, okay, the war started, what I can do. So in the first weeks of this war, it was really a big feeling of a common endeavor that we can do something, buying tactical medicine. I know like rich people in Germany who gave as a present their family houses from 17th century to orphanages from Bucha. And Bucha is the place where my friends have dachas, and I already have that in my friends' circle. So really, I feel like very lonely, and I'm even not in Kiev. You know, I don't know. And I also don't want to like disturb other people with our war, but it's not other war. It's really, we are all in this war already. And it's nice to talk nicely and to do nice things, but we really, I think, not really understanding in what danger we are. The next, please. Yeah. Maybe 5 more minutes.
Yeah,
Next
so
picture. Yeah.
we have 5 photos in total. Which one would you like to talk about?
Maybe this one, but we can then just to show others to show that I'm not writing about the war. Yeah, it's strange because this book of photography, it's a very strange mixture of maybe even erotic and catastrophe. Could you show the next one? And then we'll... And yeah, it's my picture.
The cloud in Berlin?
Yes.
Yeah. During COVID?
Corona cloud, I would say.
Corona cloud.
Yes. And the next one. And it's the really striking photo of one Wehrmacht soldier in Ukraine, 49. And actually this picture is showing how the gaze of a photographer can do out of war sort of natural event. So the even the smoke is repeating the shape of the tree. But maybe just back to, I don't know what really I
no,
already,
let me. Maybe Katja, we can go back to the second picture.
Yeah. I mean, it's really strange situation because I'm alone. I'm already. I'm the only one who is not in Europe. Yeah, I still have Ukrainian pass, and I have now all the time of the world. It's just not.
But you're doing fine, and we're listening to you, and we would really love to hear you talk about this because you tell a very important story about this photograph.
I don't know, important story, you know, I really feel like all words are already said because we know the logic of the war, we know how it happened with Hitler, we know everything, and we are coming back to our normal life. And I feel always with like my bodily tension and my question on everybody, like as if I am like disturbing people or spoiling the air. I don't know, and it's really a strange situation So it's Maidan. Maybe you saw many pictures from this place, and it's strange to talk about Kiev all the time. It's somewhere in East Europe, and you see there the cloister which is built in 11th century by Constantinople architects. Sophia Cathedral. Mm-hmm. And it's now this place is completely empty, and all these protests in Ukraine in 2013 and 14 took place in this square, and it's really a strange place because you have the layers of history. And I found this picture in my family archive after the Maidan protests, and we see here actually 2 ruins. This round building is a parliament, and actually people who were protesting in Maidan didn't know. I really asked many people, so it's completely out of away from the memory of inhabitants of the city that it was the place of parliament, and they were standing in these masses exactly on this place. And on the opposite side, it's one of the first actually skyscrapers in Russian Empire, Ginsburg House, which was also ruined. And this street where the people are going up, it's the street where I was born. So, and actually I was interested in these layers of history, how we are looking through the pictures of Maidan, which were very present at that time in the press of in the European press. This picture, and my mother, it's a picture made 43 obviously by Wehrmacht officer, maybe because it was prohibited for Ukraine. Actually nobody had photo cameras. Mm-hmm. And they were
confiscated.
Confiscated, yeah. Exactly, like radios. And my mother came back to Kiev 44, just 1 year older than this child there. And all her family was killed in Babi Yar, in this biggest massacre place of Holocaust. And they could escape Kiev, and they were moving up to the street through the ruins, because the complete Krещатик was ruined, the main street, and yeah, the house was there. And it's really hard to retell what I wrote. I'm sorry, because texts have their own breath.
You come, if I may, Margot.
Yeah, please.
At some point when we were talking this week, I suggested to you that at some point, and Reiner Raut was also referring to this, we people, we need time to experience this at a very deep level, because we can't write, we can't make cinema about this right now, but eventually, and I propose to you that maybe eventually this will also happen about this war. And then you said something really important. You said that you fear actually that all art and literature is becoming a form of acceptance.
Yes, you know, I just have a very modest small column in a very big newspaper. I don't really know about certain phases of feedback, but since the war started, I'm writing only about war. Of course, I'm not taking the most violent pictures, because sometimes I don't know. I think it's important to consume these violent pictures in a sort of in intimacy and computer, but not in the printed media. It's my concern, because sometimes through the viewing of violence, we are multiplying this violence, and it's another topic. So actually, how to regard violence taken over other people, and not to repeat this kind of dishonor put upon them. I don't know, my English is vanishing, but anyway. It's really, maybe it happened like 1 month ago, then everybody actually noticed that we are tired of this war, that we are, not only psychologically, but I mean, I don't know, we don't have a real influence, because this feeling that we can convince them and this, and that politicians would take right decisions. Of course, they are taking many decisions. I'm really irritated by this pigeon, but anyway. You know, I really thought that, I thought about that when there are so many events on Ukraine, this and that, and literature, how to write about war and this. I really feel that that writing about the war in this kind of normal, or discussing the war in a sort of normal, smooth language, and we are all eloquent and all that, it's already a sort of acceptance. Like, okay, and if you're asking me about work, I'm asking, okay, how to buy the minibus which can evacuate few museums from endangered regions, or how to take care of I don't know, kids with autism and so on. You know, there are so many things. War creates just immense amount of unluck. I don't know, yeah, and grief and problems, and so how to fix all that, that's work. And to write, I mean, the most striking documents now are testimonies, and testimonies, and really direct testimonies, not only from people who suffer, who flee, who experience something, but also of this huge, enormous amount of people who are creating self-organizations, self-organized. Actually, it's the most striking society, and if we are, there are really many deficits, and also in this cancel of Russian culture and really like developing of nationalistic voices and all that. But the most amazing is this self-organization and this like it's an alternative society. It's a better society, and I watch this kind of brigades all over the world. Like people are finding themselves to stop the war, to resist the war in the simplest handwork, you know, and not like in writing. Concerning writing, I really felt it when I saw one video in Instagram, and it was a post of my friend who's a photographer, and he made one of the, yeah, okay, it's, I can really chat. And it was a video of enormous beauty because the stars was fallen in the dark background, and I was really watching it, and I couldn't understand first that I'm in a loop. And it was possibly phosphor bomb. And then I pressed the button, audio button, and I heard a soldier who was like fascinated, and then he was cursing, and then he was almost losing his breath. And I was really thinking, I'm watching a movie about dying soldier. And, you know, like, so what's going on? We are really watching death online, and it's already like a movie. So actually I made a stop, and I wrote about this kind of effect, that this kind of acceptance in the art, that we, on the end, we form a text where we make a movie, but people are dying now.
Yeah. Can we thank you for your courage for talking to us tonight?
It's not a courage, it's Ohnmacht.
Ohnmacht.
Yeah.
Thank you, Katja. We are at the end of an important encounter, I think. And we want to thank all our writers who are here on the front row. And we invite you all perhaps also to talk to each other afterwards in the bar. We have time for that, and I think it's important.
There's nothing more to say from my side. Thank you very much.
Yep.